Hey, this is E-Rock, and welcome back to the Late Night Saga reviews. If you're new here, I've been doing the Late Night Saga for quite some time, where I talk about late night television of usually the 70s, 80s, and 90s, sometimes earlier, sometimes later. And when I do one of these reviews, I am looking at a movie or a documentary, usually which is either about late night television, or it's featuring one of the stars of late night television going off and doing something else. So, tonight, I'm looking at a movie that came out earlier in 2024, which is called Saturday Night.
My name is Lorne Michaels. I'm the producer and creator of Saturday Night. We're excited because there's never been a television show like this.
You ready, camera one?
Oh!
This movie, from director Jason Reitman, is about the first ever episode of Saturday Night Live, which appeared 50 years ago. In fact, back then, it wasn't called Saturday Night Live, it was just called Saturday Night, which is why their famous tagline is Live from New York, it's Saturday Night, because that was the name of the show, which of course is because there was another show on TV already called Saturday Night Live, which is the name that they wanted to use, but couldn't. But I guess they decided, well, instead of coming up with something better, we'll just call it Saturday Night for now, and then if the other show gets canceled, then we're going to take over their name, which they did.
NBC Saturday Night!
This movie has a very narrow focus, and it's kind of interesting. It's just chronicling an event in time, a little slice of history. There's really not a plot. There's no growth. There's no character arcs or any of that sort of stuff. This movie is attempting to document in somewhat real time the 90 minutes before the first ever episode of Saturday Night Live, because the show itself is 90 minutes long. I guess they thought, let's give you a movie that's 90 minutes, but it's the 90 minutes before they went live on the air for the very first time in 1975.
Jesus Christ.
Where do they unearth such a cavalcade of talent? Hey man, you okay?
Maybe ask me again in 90 minutes.
Why? What happens in 90 minutes?
We go live.
Now, Saturday Night Live is not a show that I know the complete history of. I know a little bit of it. I've watched it for many years on and off, and I know a little bit that I've learned here and there from the history of late night. But if I had to hazard a guess, I would guess that they have compressed time a little bit. Not quite as much as Birdman, but I would guess that events that happened in the days or weeks or even months leading up to the actual original first episode have kind of all been gathered and compressed into this one movie. They may not have all happened in the 90 minutes before 11:30 p.m. on that Saturday. For example, we see Lorne Michaels running around not only up and down all the floors at 30 Rock, to all the different studios and writers' rooms and executives' offices, and down to the lobby and out on the street, he's watching the guy try to recruit an audience to come in. We also see Lorne Michaels going next door to the bar when he's looking for John Belushi, who's fled the show and nobody knows where he is. And they end up at the ice rink out in front of 30 Rock, wherever that is. I don't know if it's right in front or it's a couple blocks or whatever, but it seems like he travels a long ways in that 90 minutes. And I'm not saying it's not humanly possible. It might be humanly possible. It just seems like a lot. So the story, if there's a story here, is basically just that there is controlled chaos. That I guess the point is there's never been a show like this before in history. It's kind of what they're claiming, or how they're all treating it. At least for the people who were involved, it was the first time any of them had ever done anything like this. Like, for example, they don't have John Belushi's contract signed, so they don't even have their whole cast assembled. They don't have the set built. They're leading into, as the clock is constantly ticking throughout this movie for the last 90 minutes until they go live on the air, they're still building the set. They're still figuring out what sketches to put on. They have a big board with like 3 hours worth of sketches, they say, that they've got to whittle down to 90 minutes, which, don't get me wrong, is a good way to do it, because if you have more than you need, then you can just chop away all the weak stuff and end up with just solid gold television. I'm not sure that actually happened on the first episode, but as far as the outcome being solid gold, I do believe they whittled 33 hours down to 90 minutes.
4 minutes or nothing.
Well, I need 2 minutes.
You need me to cut 2 minutes off my sketch? I could do that, Lon. I mean, that's 6 minutes only. You know,
No, I need 2 minutes of material. It's 2 minutes or nothing.
Is this for real?
But the main character of the movie is obviously Lorne Michaels, who is the producer, creator of Saturday Night Live. And so he's running around from floor to floor trying to put out fires. He's trying to make the cast happy. He's trying to meet all the crew's needs. He's trying to make the executives happy. He has to go to a meeting of the general managers of the affiliates who are all have waited until 10 minutes before showtime to gather to just suddenly surprise him by flying to New York City and appearing in a room in 30 Rock somewhere, so that he can convince them to put him on the air. It's like, I don't know if it's really true in real life, but the way the movie plays it is like the network hasn't even decided if they're going to put him on the air. They have a rerun of Johnny Carson already queued up so that if they decide 5 seconds before air that they just don't want to run the show tonight, they'll just throw to Johnny Carson instead. And I don't know if it was that close down to the wire in real life, but that may be one of those things where the decision was made in the days leading up to the show or even on the day of. And so it felt like the last minute, but was it the literal last second like it was in this movie? Who knows? I don't know.
5, 4.
Are we going live or going to tape?
2.
I mean, the movie is really entertaining. It is a pure work of fiction. I mean, if I were to go, well, that didn't happen. Well, that happened later. No, that we weren't doing, oh, okay. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's just, it's enjoyable to watch.
Let's talk a little bit about the actors. Gabriel LaBelle plays Lorne Michaels, the main character. And I think it's good that he doesn't do an impression. Famously, Dr. Evil from the Austin Powers movies, played by Mike Myers, is an impression of Lorne Michaels.
Right.
At least his voice and his mannerisms, not so much, his look is borrowed from Blofeld from James Bond. The impression, at which we had all heard that Dana Carvey created the impression of Lorne Michaels.
My first hook into Lorne, because usually it's one phrase,
right,
was Lorne saying, I still have no fucking first act. Now, he would bite his nails, and I just did this.
And then, of course, Mike Myers took it and turned it into the Dr. Evil character.
Is it pleasant if somebody, dumps a bucket of shit on your head? Yeah, it is. It is unpleasant.
My point is, it's a good thing that Gabriel LaBelle didn't do that. He just I think they just decided to cast somebody who sort of believably looked close enough and sounded close enough to Lorne that he could just be himself and not do an impression, and I think that works to his benefit.
Right.
And I think that's true of a lot of the cast. I think they tried to cast people that kind of looked the part, and then they didn't, I don't think, other than Dylan O'Brien, who plays Dan Aykroyd, who really does seem to be doing an impression, and I guess I didn't even know that Dan Aykroyd was an impression that you could do, because I've never seen anybody do it before.
Well, the script specifically called for a Smith & Wesson K-frame Model 19 Combat Magnum.
Kid, this ain't an armory. No one's gonna notice the difference.
I'll tell you who'll notice. A few of the fine folks at home will lug M16s to 4 feet of swamp troops in Quang Nam.
Dylan O'Brien does a great job, and if you compare the sketches, the original sketches with Dan Aykroyd to the ones here in the movie, wow, he's really close. And he looks the part and he sounds the part. The other ones I don't think sound the part as much. The guy playing Chevy Chase, the girls playing Jane Curtin and Gilda and Lorraine Newman. I don't think they all necessarily sounded or tried to sound the part. I think they just sort of put them in the hair and costumes, and then they just kind of played the characters as well as they could, and I think they all did great.
Well, I keep feeling like any minute Lauren's just gonna ship me back.
Oh, no, on this budget, we can't afford the postage.
It is a little bit of a shame. I think the stuff with John Belushi and Chevy Chase really kind of overshadows everyone else, probably as it did in real life.
They want to shave me.
Oh, careful. There's no jaw under that beard, just 10 pounds of neck.
Chevy.
I'm pretty sure you'll be seeing those.
The women don't get as much to do. You see like, it's cool how they gave each one of them kind of one scene. Gilda's only scene really is where she's hitches a ride on the camera crane and she's riding around. Jane Curtin kind of has one big scene where she's talking to Garrett Morris, I think. Garrett Morris gets many scenes in the movie. They gave him a lot to do.
You are a professional comedian.
No, not by trade.
Okay.
You see, I'm actually a playwright.
All right.
Perhaps you saw my work at the Black Arts Repertoire Theater in Harlem.
Yeah, I must have missed that.
The musical guest, Billy Preston, he was played by John Batiste, who was Stephen Colbert's band leader on The Late Late Show. That's kind of an interesting little trivia note. And the other guy that I don't really know that much about is Michael O'Donoghue, who was the head writer, who has a very aggressive or hostile type of comedy, and he's really just kind of thumbing his nose at the executives and at sort of anyone that just doesn't say that this is the greatest thing ever. He gets a big scene where he goes head to head with George Carlin, who's the guest host for the night.
I think I understand the reason you might be struggling. You see, these are scenes.
Well, sketches.
They revolve around acting.
Michael.
And that must feel foreign when you're a ponytailed vulture feeding off the corpse of Lenny Bruce.
It's okay. He's right. You're right. Because I wouldn't want to make these skits any worse than they actually are.
It was a pretty good little cameo played by Matthew Rhys. You know, I know him from a few other things by now, and so it was, you know, he just sort of pops in, does his scene, and leaves. As does J.K. Simmons, comes in, chews the scenery as Milton Berle, Uncle Milty.
They're going to remember Mr. Television. Their Uncle Milty. Who the fuck are you, kid?
I don't know that much about Milton Berle. I used to see him on TV growing up. And of course on TV he was fairly clean. I guess I know now that he has a reputation for his jokes being dirty. I didn't know that he was supposed to be such a real life pervert or jerk, asshole to everybody else in the room. They play him as being a pretty rough character in this movie.
At 67, I still feel like a 20-year-old. Unfortunately, there's never one around.
Another personality I didn't know anything about was Rosie, Lorne Michaels' wife. And I've never really even heard of her, so she was helping him put the show together. She seems to be attached to his hip almost, well, not quite, but she's there more than almost anybody else in the movie by his side, other than O'Donoghue, I suppose.
Where do these ideas even come from?
Oh, I just sent an imaginary dog to fetch an imaginary stick.
Must be some dog.
He's very well trained.
So there's another person I'd love to, you know, read more about it. So maybe she's kind of like the Meryl Marco behind David Letterman's success or whatever. Of course, everyone was talking about Corey Michael Smith's portrayal of Chevy Chase in the movie.
Jesus. I can't wait.
Again, I don't know that he was doing an impression vocally or anything. I think, you know, to play Chevy, all you have to do is fall down a couple times and just kind of act like an asshole.
Sorry, tripped over my penis.
Although in a very meta way, if you don't try to do an impression of Chevy, wouldn't that be kind of fitting? Because he had the impression of Gerald Ford, where he didn't put on the bald cap or the fat suit or look anything like him or try to mimic his voice. It's just like, in order to impersonate Gerald Ford, all I have to do is fall down. So maybe this is kind of the same thing. We see Andy Kaufman come in.
Here I come to save the day.
We'd already seen this same scene reenacted with Jim Carrey in Man on the Moon.
Here I come to save the day.
Now I've seen the real sketch that he did on the real episode.
Here I come to save the day. That means that tiny house is on the way.
What I don't know if it's real or not is the way they portrayed Jim behind the scenes. He's doing that foreign man character where he doesn't speak very good English and he just seems confused and naive, just sort of wandering around in a stupor all the time. They showed him doing that sometimes in Man on the Moon in his personal life just to confuse people, I guess.
Hello, everybody. Andy, what do you can't keep wandering off like that.
In this movie, they show that he's doing that the entire time backstage at SNL. Nobody ever questions it or thinks it's weird. Maybe they just know that that's the way he is, but I'm like, was he really doing that in real life? Just kind of wandering around, getting lost and not knowing what's going on or pretending like he doesn't.
Where is the bathroom? Neil, can you show Andy to the washroom?
Yeah.
My overall impression was I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. It never lets up for a moment. It really kind of transported me to another time and place. I saw things I recognized, but then I also saw tons of things that I didn't know. I'm curious how close it actually is to the real history, but I was transfixed and just sort of excited to see this sort of hour and a half of history unfolding in front of my eyes.
Okay, well, what kind of show is it, Lauren? Do you even know what the show is?
Of course.
Are you gonna share it with the rest of us?
Yes. In 88 minutes.
Oh my God.
There were two scenes that stood out to me as curiosities, given my knowledge of late night TV. One is there's a scene where Johnny Carson calls into the studio like 10 minutes before the show to talk to Lorne and just basically tells him that his show is going to flop and it's going to be a big failure. And that, you know, he's like, if you screw this up, I'm taking back my time slot.
Here's some friendly advice. Enjoy your little show, But don't get too comfortable. You're a bench warmer, a stalking horse. It's my fucking network. It's my fucking night. No hard feelings, so.
And they keep saying in the movie that, like Lauren, we gave you Johnny's Saturday night time slot. For those of you that don't know, Johnny Carson used to host the Tonight Show Monday through Friday, but it was such a popular show that they would air reruns on Saturday night and Sunday night. So so in this movie, the network is like, we're giving you Johnny's Saturday night time slot, Lauren. You better not screw this up, or we're giving it back to Johnny. It's like, okay, so Johnny didn't want it. First of all, this is what we know from the real history, right? Johnny was tired of his reruns being used on Saturday and Sunday because he's like, well, if he could get NBC to run something else on those nights, then he can use his reruns during the week, like on Monday, Tuesday, and then only have to produce 3 new shows a week. That's what he did. He didn't run 2 reruns. He started running like a rerun on Monday and a guest host on Tuesday, or vice versa. And then Johnny would just host Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Johnny didn't want Saturday back. I think Johnny, in real life, was the one who suggested to NBC that they find something else to run, which is why SNL was invented in the first place. Now, that doesn't mean that he wouldn't have called Lorne and put the pressure on him. I don't know. He might have. Is this an anecdote that really came from Lorne, or did it come from somebody else, or was it just made up for the movie? And the other thing that stuck out, because I know this piece of trivia, is throughout the whole movie they keep saying there's Dick Ebersol, and he's sort of the voice of the exec. He's like Lorne's producing partner or whatever, but he's sort of the voice of the executive saying, Lorne, you better get this together or it's not going to work. And he keeps saying, you know, or it wasn't even him. I think there was another exec. Oh, it's the exec played by Willem Dafoe. I can't remember his name. But he's like, Lorne, if you can't get your act together, we'll just postpone it till next week. And Lorne is just saying, no, you cannot postpone this show, period. He's like, it's sort of interesting. I think that Lorne sort of has the notion that he would rather see this show fail live on TV, because at least that would be interesting. He's trying to create something new that's never been seen on television, I guess, right? All this counterculture stuff that wasn't being seen, all the hippies and the intellectuals and all of the hip music and stuff. He wanted all that on TV, and he just keeps saying, we can't postpone the show no matter what. We just have to go. He goes, as long as we can just last another hour, once we go live, it's like we can't do anything wrong, or there's no going back, or I don't know what he's thinking. Like, they have talent, they have a show. He knows there's going to be a show. If it's a train wreck or not, I don't think he cares, at least as depicted in this movie, as long as they get there. No one else is convinced it's going to be worth their time, but he seems to think, well, it will be worth your time. But my point is, he keeps saying we don't need to prepare more. We don't need another week. We just need to go, no matter what. We just need to go tonight. And he will not hear anything about postponement. So what they don't tell you in the movie is that the show was already postponed. This is the trivia that I know. Because originally it was supposed to air the Saturday before, and they didn't have their act together, and so the network postponed them. And in its place, they put on a special episode of Tom Snyder's Tomorrow Show, the only time it ever aired on Saturday, as far as I know. A 90-minute show, supposedly. We've seen a clip. I used it in Three's a Crowd. Supposedly the 90-minute show was like 80 minutes of Jerry Lewis being interviewed by Tom Snyder, and then 10 minutes of Tom talking to the not ready for primetime players.
And we just happen to have the producer of the program, Mr. Lorne Michaels, with us, the producer of Saturday Night, members of his company, and let's spend a couple of minutes talking about your show. Lorne, I'd like to meet your gang.
And so then they said, well, they're not ready this week, but they'll be on next week. And then the next week is when they actually aired, which is when this movie takes place. What they don't say in the movie is that they've already been postponed, and that would be a great motivation for Lorne in the movie to say, NBC is not afraid to postpone us. They've done it before. They can do it again. And that's why he could think, we can't let them do it again because they'll just keep doing it forever and ever and ever. We just have to go. That would make sense to me, but they don't ever mention that as his motivation. They don't mention that it's been postponed. My point is, it seemed like the movie was trying not to admit that they had already been postponed once. They were kind of acting like this is all the first time this has ever happened. So I was surprised when I saw the end credits and they showed a picture of the cast on Tom Snyder's Tomorrow Show. So I applaud their attention to detail and their historical accuracy. I just don't know why they didn't mention it earlier in the movie. Why would they create this whole set for Tom Snyder and put all the actors there in their costumes from that night and hire some stand-in to play the back of Tom Snyder's head just for a still photo? Was there a deleted scene or something? I'm curious to see if this thing comes out on Blu-ray and it has any deleted stuff. And another thing that I really wanted to do in preparation for this movie was to watch the actual first episode of SNL, which I thought was going to be harder to find than it was. It's on Peacock. You can watch it in its entirety. Interesting thing, if you go on there and look, because they have all 50 years. We're currently in, I think, season 50 of Saturday Night Live. Some people wondering if this will be the year that Lauren retires. And the interesting thing is, if you look back through the seasons that are on Peacock, seasons 40 through 50 have complete episodes. If you look, they're all like an hour and 5 minutes, which is how long a 90-minute show would be if you took out all the commercials. And I don't know what happened at year 40 that made that happen, but if you look at all the years before year 40, going almost all the way back to the beginning, you'll see that the episodes are not that long. They are 40 minutes, 50 minutes, 55, some of them even shorter. I know people have said that it was because of the music clearance issues, and honestly, if that's true, I don't know why it would have been true for so long. That's something they would have figured out around season 20 or something, so I don't know why 20 through 40 would all have musical performances taken out of them because of licensing issues. But I'm not sure that really holds true anyways if you look at the timing. So they settled on a formula pretty quickly, which was every episode has, a monologue from the guest host. It has 2 musical performances, and it has a weekend update, and then everything else is just however many sketches they can fit in. So if every episode has 2 musical performances and they're around 4 or 5 minutes long, you take those 2 out, the show is going to be 10 minutes shorter, 55 minutes. Okay, there's several episodes on Peacock that are 55 minutes, and this may be why, because they removed 2 musical performances. But there's episodes that are like 40 minutes long. Why would they need to take out, at least 2 sketches? I can see taking out a sketch here and there because it also had licensed music in it, although they could probably replace the music. But I don't know that there would be that many episodes that would have 2 or more sketches that needed to be removed for music reasons. So I offer an alternative explanation, which is that many of the earlier seasons had previously been sold into syndication on cable, broadcast television, and they were often shortened to a 60-minute time slot, so that would be about 42 minutes without commercials. And so I'm wondering if a lot of the episodes in these in-between seasons are taken from those like syndicated masters, and that's why they're 42 minutes or less. So if you get a 42-minute episode and then you pull a musical performance out, maybe now it's 35 minutes or whatever. There are many on Peacock that are 30 minutes or less. Although some are even more confusing, because there was one, I was going through and I saw one with Kevin Spacey as the host, and it was like 17 minutes long, and I thought, is that because Spacey got canceled and they pulled all of his sketches out of the show and there's only like 2 sketches left? No, if you watch that episode, he's in all the sketches that are in that episode. So why is it only 17 minutes? I really don't have any idea. So I thought when I went back to the first season that they would also be shortened episodes, but no. The first 5 seasons are actually complete, 105 minutes, just like the new stuff. Why? Because a few years ago, actually when I say a few, I think it was early 2000s, mid 2000s, when there was a DVD release of seasons 1 through 5 complete. And this is the first time I've ever heard of SNL ever being released in complete seasons. Most of the decades that they've been on the air, they've released like best of DVDs, best of this actor, best of commercial parodies, best of news parodies or whatever, best musical performances maybe. I think this is the only time they ever released complete seasons with all the episodes complete length. Why did they only do 5? If I had to guess, 2 reasons. 1, maybe they didn't sell very well, so they didn't do any more. Why stop at 5? Why even go to 5 in the first place? Well, the first 5 seasons are of a kind. They were all produced by Lorne Michaels, and then I believe he left at the end of season 5. He wanted to go on and do other things with his career. What happened was they hired a guy named Gene Dumanian, who came in to be the new showrunner, and I guess the show was awful. He got kicked off after the first season, and then Dick Ebersol took over for seasons 7 through 10. The show was almost canceled at the end of season 10, but it was saved with Lorne Michaels agreeing to come back and become the showrunner again with season 11, which is around when I historically started watching the show when I was a kid. I think they had a whole new cast with Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman, and Nora Dunn and Jan Hooks and all them. That was my first SNL cast, the one that I will always remember the most fondly. But I'm guessing if they were going to keep coming out with complete seasons, they would have to then go to 6 through 10, which nobody wants, except, Joe Piscopo wants some royalty money. But that is just so much nonsense to talk about. To get to the first episode, I finally saw it in its entirety. I may have seen parts of it before, but I sat down on Peacock and I watched the whole thing.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
Interesting. Not as funny as I would have liked, I suppose. They were still working out the kinks. It was interesting that instead of doing the traditional monologue where the host comes out at the beginning and introduces the show and says, here's the musical guest, it's going to be great. They didn't do that. They had George Carlin come out. He did a short monologue. It seemed to almost cut away in the middle of his monologue. And then, of course, they do some sketches and then they come back to his monologue again out on the main stage in front of the audience. And then throughout the show, he comes back. He does 4 or 5 monologue segments sprinkled throughout the show. They must have had him standing out there all night, I guess. And they have 2 musical guests that each do 2 songs. So that's a lot for SNL. I almost felt like they spent more time on the guests than they did on the cast. Not only did they have the 4 musical performances and like 4 monologues from Carlin, they had the Andy Kaufman bit. He wasn't a cast member. Valerie Bromfield does some stand-up. She's not a cast member. They had a film from Albert Brooks. He wasn't a cast member. And then, of course, they had the Jim Henson Muppet segment.
Well, you want dessert, Lubus.
What I want, Angel Buns, is not on the menu. Come here, you. Yeah. Oh, sweetheart.
Everyone says the Muppets were such a bad idea for the show. I think it was actually an interesting idea. The Muppets, had not started out as children's characters, but I think by 1975 they probably had that reputation from Sesame Street. Even though they're different characters, the Muppet technology kind of all looked the same. So I think the idea of kind of taking these childrenish characters and having them do adult things on SNL was kind of edgy and subversive. And I think Henson was into it because he never thought the Muppets were for kids. He just thought they were kind of for all ages and all entertainments. There's a good Defunct Land episode about the early Muppets, if you ever look at that, before they had the Muppet Show and before Sesame Street. So it was an interesting idea, but it really does fall flat, as everyone says. If you go by the Saturday Night Movie, it's because nobody on the writing staff of SNL wanted to write for the Muppets. They didn't like the Muppets for whatever reason. I guess they thought it was taking up their valuable sketch time. So they didn't bother to write any scripts for them or any scenes. And so I don't know if the Muppeteers were improvising or if they just wrote their own stuff, but it's not very funny. But I think they're on for several episodes in season 1. I'm curious to see if they got any better. I probably will watch the rest of season 1 pretty soon just to see how it measures up. It was helpful watching the Saturday Night Movie because when you watch the first ever sketch on SNL's episode 1, it's got John Belushi and then it's got this other guy, and I didn't know who the other guy was. And now I know that it was Michael O'Donoghue, the head writer. Sort of throughout the history of SNL, they sometimes have writers that aren't on-camera performers usually, but they'll occasionally stick them in a sketch. This seems like the first case. Conan O'Brien was a writer that occasionally did sketches. Apparently John Mulaney started that way. He was not a cast member, he was a writer, but he appeared. Actually, if you go back, Chevy Chase apparently was never a cast member. He was a writer. But for some reason, they put him in front of the camera on every single episode of season 1 or whatever.
My wife, she's quite a gal, and I love her for it.
This may have been a lot more relevant and subversive 50 years ago, the first episode of SNL. It was still interesting. It had some funny moments. I think the best sketch was the Dan Aykroyd one with the break-in, the security company break-in. It was still funny.
Hi there! Please do not be alarmed. This is only a simulated assault and burglary.
Repeat, this is a simulated assault and burglary. This could happen to you at any time. In fact, it just has.
Honey, call the police! Do something!
No, don't call the police. I am the police. I might be, anyway.
Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Cromer. My name is Kenny Vorsrather. I'm president of Trojan Horse Home Security. I've broken into your home tonight to illustrate to you and your family just how...
So do I recommend watching episode 1 of Saturday Night Live? I mean, if you're into that sort of thing, it's an amusing cultural artifact. Do I recommend the movie Saturday Night? Absolutely. It was a ton of fun. For Fanboy Films, this is the Late Night Saga. See you next time.
We're not worrying at all. We're just listening for his call. Here I come to save the day. That means that Mighty Mouse is on the way.